All right, today we're jumping headfirst into one of the most challenging and, frankly, disturbing novels ever written, the Marquis de Sade's Justine. This isn't just a story, it's a brutal philosophical experiment that takes pure, unwavering virtue and pits it against a world that seems hell-bent on crushing it.
So, the whole shocking premise of the book really boils down to the fates of two sisters, both orphaned and left to fend for themselves. Justine, our protagonist, chooses a life of virtue, of piety. Her reward? The scaffold. Her sister, Juliet, dives headfirst into a life of vice. And what happens to her? She becomes a rich, powerful, and respected countess. I mean, that contrast right there, that's the central agonizing question the novel forces us to confront.
So let's start by following the younger sister, Justine. She has this pure, unshakable belief in God, in the idea that goodness will prevail. And that belief is about to be put through the ringer in some of the most relentless and cruel ways you can possibly imagine. All Justine really wants is to be safe. That's it. She's operating on this one simple idea, which turns out to be incredibly tragic. If I'm a good person, good things will happen and I'll be protected. And that right there, that's the hypothesis that the entire novel sets out to just viciously tear apart. But from the moment she steps out into the world, this is what she hears. She's told, flat out, that her most deeply held principles are like a currency that nobody accepts. You can't buy safety, you can't buy food, you can't buy anything with it. The world she's entered just doesn't trade in goodness. And here's where things get really twisted. This is the central paradox of the story, laid bare, time and time again. What saves Justine? An act of crime. And what gets her into trouble in the first place? Her own virtue. She's explicitly told, look, your moral code is a disaster waiting to happen. It's crime that just saved your life. So this begs the question, right? Who are these people tormenting her? What makes them tick? Well, to really get what's happening, you have to understand their shared philosophy. It's a radical worldview known as libertinage, and it basically takes Enlightenment ideas about reason and nature and twists them into a full-blown justification for cruelty. Now, what's crucial to understand is that these aren't just random acts of evil. Oh no, they are backed up by a coherent, if terrifying, philosophical system. The libertines believe that nature itself requires destruction to function, that the strong are supposed to dominate the weak, and that all morality, especially religion, is just a fiction cooked up to keep the masses in line. And their argument often starts with a kind of social critique. They'll say, hey, look at how unjust the world is. The rich are horrible to the poor. And then they use that injustice as a launchpad to say, well then, crime isn't just an option for the poor, it's the only logical response. It's a necessity. This quote just perfectly captures how they see nature. It's not some gentle moral force. To them, it's a chaotic engine that needs destruction in order to create. So in this insane worldview, committing murder isn't a sin. It's a service. You're just helping the natural order of things along. And this destructive way of thinking, it extends to everything, even the most sacred human bonds. Here you have a surgeon, Rodin, arguing that he has the absolute right to perform deadly experiments on his own daughter for the sake of science. His logic? He gave her life, so he has the power to take it back. It's absolutely chilling. But the ultimate target of this whole philosophy, the final boss, if you will, is the very idea of God. For the libertine worldview to hold up, it has to launch a direct and brutal assault on the concept of divine justice. You hear it again and again from them. God is just an illogical, unnecessary invention, a chimera, a phantom that the powerful created to frighten everyone else into submission. Nature, they insist, is its own engine. It runs itself and needs no creator. And they demand proof, which is a very Enlightenment-era way of thinking. They argue that a truly just God wouldn't hide his laws in some obscure book for corrupt priests to interpret. No, a real God would make his laws undeniably clear to everyone, like, as Brussock says, writing them across the face of the sun in letters of fire. Okay, so after all this unimaginable suffering, this gauntlet of philosophical cruelty, the novel finally reaches its conclusion with a deeply unsettling reunion and one last shocking twist. In this devastating final scene, it all comes full circle. You have virtue, scarred, broken, and literally condemned to death, coming face to face with vice, who is prosperous, admired, and powerful. And then comes the ultimate cynical blow. Juliet, who has built her entire fortune on cruelty and betrayal, delivers this pious, completely hypocritical speech. She actually tells her suffering sister that the success of criminals is just a test from God and that true happiness can only be found in the virtue that she herself never once practiced. The nerve! And just as Juliet gets her own pardon, a force the novel ironically calls Providence delivers its own final judgment. A bolt of lightning streaks down from the sky and kills Justine instantly. It's this final, brutal act from a universe that seems every bit as arbitrary and cruel as the men who tormented her. So, what are we left with? Well, it all comes down to the novel's central, provocative question. Was Sade writing a twisted cautionary tale, trying to warn us away from vice by showing its absolute horror? Or was he making a much, much darker point? That in a world governed by power and corruption, practicing virtue is just a form of suicide. The novel gives no easy answers, and that, perhaps, is the most disturbing part of all.